Hi everyone, can you guys hear me?
Yes, we can.
Yes,
Okay,
We can hear you.
we
perfect.
can hear you.
We'll give it a few more minutes for other folks to join. Hi Kaushik. Kaushik is still connecting audio. Karen as well.
Hi. Hello.
Hi. Kaushik, should we get started?
Yes, please.
Okay, so I hope everyone's back home with after the summit and have resumed the work. Me and Kaushik were discussing this morning if we need this meeting since we have caught up on everything during the summit. But one small thing that I did want to discuss was review the working groups, because we are looking a lot of back and forth messages on scheduling the working group sessions, the meetings, and maybe we can have a short meeting and review that list. And go ahead, Kaushik.
Yeah, please finish your thought. I had one other thing to bring up.
Okay, absolutely. So my plan is, with everyone here, I'll bring up the working group document. We have mostly set up the working group weekly sessions as well. We can advertise that to this community, and we can update the volunteers on the list, and we can make sure that the leads on every group are actually aware that they're the leads, which means that they need to host those meetings, and one of the leads should actually be there on the meeting to moderate the session, take notes, and we should establish the cadence that every working group session update should be covered in this meeting, because it's nearly impossible for everyone from the community to attend every working group session, including myself and Kaushik, which will help us catch up. So we'll get to the working groups discussion. That's one thing on my mind, and that's the only thing on my mind. Kaushik, go ahead.
Yeah, no, that's great. One thing, sorry, I had to miss the Dev Summit for my personal reasons. But then one thing that would be important is for us to collate all of the key areas or action items, especially emerging from the summit, and we should then prioritize those and then allocate those to the working groups as well, so that each working group can tackle each of those areas. I think, Sana, you and I should probably create that structure, at least to create the initial template, and then request the group to help out, right, in terms of follow-ups and ownerships.
That's excellent idea, Kaushik. Kaushik, I think we should add the link to those individual documents over this document, the one that is for working group. So this document becomes one-stop shop for everyone who's basically looking at the working group meetings, the working group volunteers, the working group leads, the working group names, and a document on which some active discussion is happening. Maybe takeaways from the summit and the next steps. So that could be the kind of document that we can create.
Yeah, so Sana, since I couldn't join the Dev Summit, can I lean on you to start that activity? I'll help out in a more logistical way, but then I'll lean on you and the group here to in terms of the specifics. I'm listening to the recordings, but it's not the same as being present during the Dev Summit.
No worries, Kaushik. Even I might not be the excellent person to contribute everything in the document. Maybe sometimes the working group leads would have more context of what kind of questions are coming. I'll always be there for help. So one thing that I need from logistics, Kaushik, is that if you could create Word docs for each working group 1 to 3 don't care, 4, 5. So we'll link those documents to basically this document, the one that I'm going to share, and then we'll get this started with the community on what was discussed in the Dev Summit. Maybe I'll throw my thoughts there. We'll expect others to share their thoughts. So people who were actually presenting on the working group topics would have probably more data on what were audience asking and what were the takeaways from those sessions.
Okay, let's share it right away.
Okay, awesome. 4 links, right? And which are editable.
Yeah.
You know, I have this corporate strategy that I can't create Word docs, which are world viewable. Can you guys see my screen? Awesome. Everybody else can see the screen? I have the working group structure in front of us. So this working group 1, we haven't had a chance to basically set up the weekly meetings. I took the lead on this working group. If you remember, during Summit, I presented that diagram, and we know that the diagram itself was not complete. There were lots of discussions on the interfaces. There were lots of discussions on how we cross-pollinate with other projects. I would like this work to be started on a weekly cadence as well. And of course, more volunteers are welcome. And this working group 1 definitely has a lot of cross-pollination with the working group 2 and probably working group 5 and maybe at some stage working group 4 as well. So that cross-pollination we can best handle during the SIG meetings if we are not able to attend every individual working group session. And the leads from each working group should also consider the cross-pollination aspects and make sure that you bring those ideas to present here in this meeting so that others who probably missed that meeting can actually attend and listen and contribute. Everything we do, as long as we have a document, that is preserving a way for others to view the work that we did and be able to comment. So I don't want the meeting notes produced from every working group session to be extremely elaborate, but at least cover the main ideas on what happened in that particular work group meeting, where the direction is going, maybe throw a diagram for the rest of the members to comment. And this can happen through gradual evolutions, but that will actually create an opportunity for others to see and get themselves updated and maybe ask questions. And that will also help you make sure that everything that you're working in your particular working group is aligned with the rest of the community. And working in so many different time zones, I think that would be the only way for us to catch up with each other. So for this, I have the action item for setting up the meeting. I don't have anything else. If any other member is interested in contributing to the work that is happening in this particular working group 1, please you're welcome to put your name here. And when we create the meeting invite, we'll make sure that everyone on that list is actually invited to that particular work group session. That's what's meant by contributors. You're listening, you're joining, maybe you're contributing to that work group as well. The second very important work group is the ORAN working group. And Kaushik, I'm also giving you the update from the summit that there was a lot of traction on this topic. 2 presentations, they were both well received. Audience were extremely interested. Lots of side discussions on the topic as well. I think this working group would be very interesting. And currently, I'm receiving a request on the Slack after a poll that the meetings for this working group should be every Thursday or every Friday, 8 a.m. Is Tim here on the call?
He doesn't seem to be, no.
Is Tim here? Okay. Alexei and Tim, they both decided that together they will lead the group, which means that they will share the responsibilities between themselves on who is basically coordinating the session. But of course, there are many other active contributors, and I'm going to set that meeting as the discussion has evolved and the poll happened, and the biggest voting was for Friday, 8 a.m., which was not my favorite time because I'm always busy 8 to 9 with the school hour, but we'll figure something out for that meeting as it suits the rest of the community and it doesn't conflict with other SIG meetings for that. So that's just an announcement. If you guys are interested in joining the work group too, make sure you type your name here. And when I create a meeting invite, I'll make sure that everyone who showed interest in doing something with this work group are actually invited to those meetings. And Kaushik, I don't know who else is from ORAN here on the call who could actually contribute more to this, but I'm just sharing on a very high level that from one summit, when Tim presented and Lexi presented their presentations, one discussion that we had after that is that they're looking for some more telco requirements on short-term focus for the ORAN SMO and for ORAN in general. So one thing I shared with Tim is that for TELUS, we are looking for the site deployment exercise. And a lot of telcos might be doing the same, but I think I need to hear from them. What is the short-term focus for ORAN? The RAN network functions are getting virtualized, and those virtualized network functions need to be redeployed to those sites. And that site deployment exercise is considered to be a short-term, most important exercise for us to focus on, which includes a lot to do with the O2 interfaces at the moment. Maybe the FCAPS management over interface and doing more advanced things with the network function for the lifecycle management can come later. But the initial deployment of the network function, managing the clusters, managing the multi-cloud environment, the O2 interface and specification is considered to be more important in the short term. So we had Wind River on that meeting, we had Red Hat people on that meeting, and they all showed that within their organizations, they're also very closely working with ORAN and they're working on O2. And most of those members are actually also represented here on the ORAN working group. One thing which I'm seeing missing on the working group from participation perspective is basically telcos. I made sure that I will join some of these calls. I'll try my best to make myself available 8 a.m. But then I'm seeing Orange. I don't know if they'll be around here. But a quick note to all the telcos on the session. Do we have any more volunteers who would be interested in participating in this working group?
So, Sana, this is what one. Sorry, but I just
go ahead.
One name may be missing is Seshu from Wind River in that.
Yeah, let's fix that.
Yeah. So Wind, I mean, he's very involved in ORAN.
I know.
So
I spoke to him as well. What is Seshu's full name?
Oh, let me see.
Okay.
For now,
I
you
want
can
to
put
make
Kuma.
sure.
You can put Kuma, but he has his other name, but Seshu Kuma probably. Okay.
Yeah.
Maybe Sana, you can put my name also, Rohit Sharma. I am representing Deutsche Telekom in ORAN Alliance, particularly for the bug group 6 and working with Alexis and other members in the ORAN Alliance for the declarative O2 perspective.
Excellent. So we have
That's great, Rohit.
Yeah, thank you.
I think Bernard was saying something. Sorry, Bernard, I cut you off. Please go ahead.
Go ahead.
I just wanted to mention the same of what Rohit just mentioned, so we're fine.
You're fine, Bernard. You got more volunteers from DT. That's excellent. So I've shared the document link here. You guys can also edit. If I misspelled a name or if I didn't get something right, feel free to go into document and fix that as well. Anyone else that we would like to have for this this meeting? ORAN. Every Friday.
So is
and
it
I will add the Zoom
no,
link.
I mean, it
once
may be. Is it? Are
ahead.
we sure it's Friday? So no, it may be very. Couple of things. On a Friday, first of all, it's Friday night in India. In some places, Friday is a holiday. I think Friday is a bad day for the meeting. I can tell you that.
I have more problems with 8 a.m. than Friday. So let's do this. What happened so far
And
is that
also it's a weekend for Europe. I mean, the weekend it's evening, Friday evening for Europe.
I know.
Israel,
People
it's
actually
holiday,
are, they
India
actually want to
is
start
night.
the family plans rather than sit on a working group meeting. So I think what has happened here is that Tim wanted to set this meeting badly, of course. And there was lots of discussion happening, but he didn't have a forum to get this started. So he started a poll. And in that poll, he looked at the available time slots from the other SIG, basically, sessions. So he could not find a lot of time slots. He had a limited number of time slots. And if you look at the poll results, maybe I can share my screen here. Tim Carey is here. He showed the poll results in the ORAN community. It was a snapshot. Is anybody else on the call aware of the poll results. I think I saw something here on this Slack channel. He put the objectives here. And the poll result was actually the reason why. I think I saw it here. So I think the
Ideally,
next good
if you can
slot was
avoid the
9.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Go ahead, Sana, please go ahead.
I'm thinking I need to see that chart where he had the votings from the results of the poll, and if I could pull it up, maybe I can
You can
find
try the link I put in the chat there, Sana.
where's that?
Just in the
This one,
Zoom
Karen.
chat.
Okay, perfect. I will try that. What kind of link is this? Where did you
It's sent to Slack directly, so it should bring if you
Okay,
click on
okay.
open Slack up above there.
All right, give me 1 second. So did you ping that to me directly, Karen?
No, it's in the chat for this meeting.
It wasn't just loading up from the link from Zoom
So
to
if you
Slack
click on
for
the
me.
link, what it will do, just click on the link again.
Okay, let me try that.
And then open Slack.
Okay, let's see that.
Hopefully it works. I've never
Oh
done
yeah,
this before.
exactly. That's the one I was looking for. So basically, they had the highest priority for Friday 8 a.m. and next highest priority was Friday 9 a.m., which is even worse for what for what the problem is right now. And then they also had Wednesday 8 a.m. With the least priority. These are numbers are actually priority wise, not number 4. So we can go back to Tim and discuss that.
Yeah.
Maybe he can reconsider the poll. And
Yeah,
since we have new volunteers,
I guess so. I'm foreseeing ongoing problems with this slot.
okay, no, it's a good thing to call out.
Yeah.
9 a.m. would be even worse, like in that sense, right?
Yeah.
Because it's going to be even more into their weekend, being more
okay.
late, right?
Exactly.
So let's reconsider the fresh list of volunteers, and I'm going to ask Tim. We should have another poll, and we'll do this again and see what time slots we land on to, and we can probably omit Fridays from there because Friday has to be in the morning because of specific time zones, and if it's morning, then it's evening for basically the European and Indian time zones. For them, it's a weekend, so we can maybe solve that problem again. We'll consider some of the other time slots. The biggest problem is that we are working with some people from India and we're working from some people from Pacific time zones, and these time zones have only one probably overlapping hour to work together. And that's why all week long, the meetings are clustered from 8 to 9, 8, 9, 8, 9, like that. So we don't get a lot of time slots because we are also trying to find a calendar which is not overlapping with the other existing SIG group meeting. Kaushik, how do you feel we should solve that problem? We probably should not care about the other working group meetings, which are ad hoc meetings, because we should only consider the SIG meetings, the TSC meetings and the SIG meetings to avoid the conflict.
Correct.
agree.
That is my preference as well. Yes.
Right? Okay, so I'm going to go back to this document. For the next action item for Tim would be to reconsider that poll and see what we can do. Any other volunteers for this that I could fill up?
I can attend those meetings too, Sana, if it works out. In the active contributors list, if you can add me. This is Bala, by the way. Yeah, Bala.
Balaji, very good.
Yeah. I can try. Let's have it there for now. Yeah. Thank you.
It would be very, very, very important, Balaji. I think from important perspective, I think this is something very critical that is evolving out of this exercise. Yeah. And good. So any other people who are still thinking about it and who can change their mind, I have dropped the link in the chat window. You guys can go and add your name if you want to. Maybe a good time slot can also encourage more volunteers to basically participate. So I'll talk to Tim and we'll find probably a better time slot for this. I'm moving on to, if we have no other questions, I'll move on to the next working group. All good? Okay, I can't see the screen, but I didn't hear anything, so I'm hoping.
I think all good.
All good. Okay, Kaushik, this working group 3. So when I was presenting the work group structure in one of my presentations, I felt as if you and I did our best brainstorming at that time, and we created this working group whose role would be to take the user stories from all other working groups and try to work in parallel for the next release. Like, for example, if ORAN is working on some use cases and they have some interesting ideas, they can pick up those ideas which are short term and high priority, could be delivered in the short term, would actually start to crystallize those user stories and provide details for that for the next release and start preparing for the next release in parallel. Structure-wise, I felt as if this group is very critical, but I don't know the mechanics of running this group. How would we even make it happen? While other working groups are still at the evolutionary stage, is working group 3 function of the SIG architecture itself, like this main meeting where we all sit together and we get the updates from all other meetings? What do you think?
So I think partly, if I just reflect back on SIG1 and some of our process for the R2 planning, right? I felt
Right.
it was a mix of, maybe some of it is, we're just as a group trying to come together, for almost like the first time, because what we did in R1 was not as well baked. Was two things. One was this more large group, more democratic driven initial decision making as phase 1 tends to become much slower. And especially, I felt that, hey, having a working group 3 as a starting point would help collate, filter, do that level of first phase, and then we bring it to SIG2 to really help define it. So it's not necessarily defining priorities necessarily. Maybe it could be, hey, applying initial filter and then bringing it to the SIG1 for decision making or for the next level of due diligence. I think that would help because we tend to be slower otherwise in closing the loop for planning. What do people think?
Any volunteers? Hands? I can't see the screen. Otherwise, I have a comment. I think, Ashik, I was one of the victims of R2 planning meetings, and you are 100% right. A lot of those meetings were not effective in terms of delivering the outcome and getting to the results for defining crisp user stories. So what would happen is that because we don't have a concrete agenda and we don't have filtered user stories to begin with, we were going in all tangents in all directions. I remember in one of those meetings, we even went out on the south, in east-west, north-south APIs discussion, and we ended up the whole discussion on that. We were, as a community, just getting to realize that there is so much that needs to be done, and we have little autonomy or control over what can we really provide as feedback to SIG1 and SIG2, basically. And I had this feedback during the summit as well, that SIG-ARC wasn't very constructive in terms of giving crisp requirements to the automation group, and the automation group eventually had to filter out things for themselves, and they had to pick what they could accomplish in the short time that's ahead of them. And they were saying that if it's a possibility for SIG architecture to deliver more crisp user stories, well structured, and actually in context with what's done in the current releases and work so far, then SIG1 would be more effective in delivering this piece. And I agree with them, maybe they're right. But we also have our reasons for not being effective, as it was the very first time exercise for this community to even think through in this pattern. And I think this working group makes sense because this will filter out some user stories, focus on the high priority items, bring just what's needed for discussion in the next SIG architecture meeting. And people who are getting to see those ideas for the first time would actually contribute their thoughts to what is potentially possible for the next release. Like, we won't even go on the tangents that are potentially in a much longer term. Like, we won't go ahead to that and waste time. So maybe that's the scoping group,
Yes.
which can help us stay on track.
Yes.
I'm aligned
That
with
is
that.
what I would. That is what I would recommend, unless we can instill the right level of rigor and planning process in SIG1 in the future. At which point we can dismantle this group.
Right, I agree with you, Kaushik. Let's keep it for now. And any more leads for this group? I would like some leads in this group who are actually participating in SIG automation as well. The reason is that the cross-pollination with SIG automation will keep this closer to the reality on what's far out in the roadmap and what's potentially possible for short term, knowing good detail about what's implementing currently in the current release. So I need volunteers from SIG automation in this work group 3. And this working group will not have weekly sessions. I don't think so. I think this can actually start ad hoc meetings when we are actively planning for the next release and when some output has been produced by the other working groups in terms of some user stories. Like every working group should produce the user stories, but working group 3 can see these user stories have a potential probability of going into the next release because they are looking very aligned with what's developed so far. It's short term, it's simpler to achieve. That filtration would happen through work group 3. So you're not going to be giving a big commitment, but this is going to be an active work when we are in state of producing requirements document for SIG automation. Kaushik, it's only you and me on the hook for this. Maybe Bernard and Eric volunteered at that time. We should definitely have more people here, especially from SIG automation.
I agree. So maybe some of the SIG2 folks who typically have been on the recent calls are not here today, like Tal or Vim and so forth. Maybe we should, I see Vim maybe, but maybe not all the SIG2 folks who are more regular participants of SIG1. Maybe we can circle back offline with them to get them to help out here.
Right. Vim would be good, Tal would be good. Balaji's on the call, he might be good because he's very active in SIG, but now probably he's also looking at his schedule on how much he can sign up across these working groups. So we'll announce this again on the Slack channel and give them the opportunity to volunteer if they can accommodate this.
Sure, Sanayal, you're right, I'm thinking.
I know you're thinking, and you are effective in this discussion. And I'm saying these meetings should not hog our calendars every week. This should happen ad hoc, when needed, as needed, and then dismantle. Like we don't have to have every working groups meeting happening every week. I don't like too many meetings anyway. Yeah. So consider and let's work towards that. Work group 4. So we had one presentation on work group 4, experience in modeling. What we were really hoping to get out of this working group was, what is the user experience from a telco perspective in their exercise of taking some artifacts from a vendor and onboarding them through Nephew-based approach and potential possibilities of the existing brownfield templating system, and how would that correlate with our TRM-based model? If that translation or correlation can happen, if there is a possibility, we could explore that and other opportunities. So probably there are different exposure paths of using Nephew. How do we derive a user experience out of those exposure paths? Maybe people are using from GitOps, or maybe people are using from Service Orchestrator, or maybe some people are directly working with the Nephew GUI eventually to try to get a package and onboard that. We wanted to evolve this vision a little bit better. And Bernard has done some initial work with Tal, and they had one presentation. Tal probably is not here in the meeting today. Bernard, do you have any other ideas and updates on where we are with this working group at this time?
Yeah, to be honest, I believe we're still in the initial phase and need to sort of structure our work a little bit more. And I need to reach out to Tal regarding the modeling aspect. The user experience aspect was not so much in the focus sort of our initial discussions which we had. So here we need to sort of definitely come up with sort of a more sort of consistent view on the scope of what we're doing here in this work group 4. Right.
We definitely need an angle of experience as well in that. So modeling is definitely an outcome. Experience would be an outcome which has to be captured in the SIG1's focus as well, because eventually, Bernard, telcos are the end users for Nephew, and telcos can share what's a good user experience, what's a bad user experience, maybe it's too advanced for us to think about user experience right away because we don't have user experience to begin with at this time. We are just doing some baseline work in the current releases. We haven't gone to the stage of like having a very sophisticated GUI or established the actors, the role of the vendors and the role of service providers.
To be honest, I believe that if I look at the workgroup 3, where we are talking about the scope and the user stories, I would regard the user experience to be part of these user stories. Whereas in the workgroup 4, it was a little bit about the conceptual foundation to make that happen. That means sort of simplifying their interactions between the different stakeholders, ensuring that we've got guidelines which structure the information which we need to process, etc. Not so much sort of the focus on sort of usability in a, let's say, portal interface or whatever, but rather sort of what are the foundations regarding how do we do the models, how do we structure the operators and the package functions, etc., to sort of streamline their interactions so that we don't have to handcraft the integration over and over again.
Yeah, and could be on the best practices for those models and package structures as well, could actually influence eventually the compliance to NEFIO requirements. Right. Let's brainstorm on that. Discuss with all. Let's rename this working group. And we still have to capture the experience part. If it makes sense, maybe we'll take the experience part of it to the user stories because it's actually related to the user stories. We'll see how that evolves because none of the working groups that are there the way they are is actually written in stone. We need to see how the volunteers are working, what's short term, how is evolving. We can change names, but in the short term, if you feel right, we can work like that. In the short term, if you feel that you are more ready to evolve the idea of the conceptual understanding of the modeling and correlation of maybe Tosca to KRM and considers the package structure, deliver best practices and processes around that, even that's a very good focus to get something started. So discuss with all, we'll reword the group and we'll put the experience part elsewhere. We'll think about it.
Understood. Will do.
Awesome. What do you think, Kaushik?
That sounds fine to me. That sounds great.
Right. We basically need people, volunteers, and we want to get the best out of what they can think through clearly at this time, and the rest can evolve as we make more progress. So, Bernard, do you think that you need any weekly sessions for this, or you like the way ad hoc discussions have been happening with you and all around Tosca and some of that? I'm going to remove some of these names because I think they came from the previous understanding of the operator SDK conversion, which became a subgroup of the SIG automation. This is reduced to modeling now, like
modeling, conceptual guidelines, etc. Yeah, sorry, I was just on mute. So I will discuss with Carl regarding the frequency and the scheduling of this meeting, and then share that with the team here.
Excellent, excellent. So we'll leave it to you, Bernard. We'll see how the next steps should go for this. And then we'll reword and rewrite some of the function of the group as well that best suits the work that you guys want to accomplish on this. For the last working group, group 5, Subhash volunteered that he's going to be leading the discussions on this working group. With Subhash, I have been working with setting up his meetings, and the service assurance and policy work group meetings are set every Thursday, 8 a.m. Okay, so basically Thursday, 8 a.m. for the working group side is actually taken in that. So people who are actually contributing in other work group meetings will have to see the schedule because it's on the calendar. From Summit, I remember this was an interesting discussion. This is basically taking the feedback from the automation observability work that they are doing on the Prometheus and some of the observability fundamentals are actually required for the service assurance and policy for to be consumed. This working group then eventually should work closely with the SIG automation group to come up with user stories, because without understanding the true reality of what that observability group is producing in terms of your network function analytics and your infrastructure analytics, I paid close attention to that presentation when John was presenting, probably Stephen was presenting that. And I saw that the potential ideas on the user stories could actually tie to the capabilities of that observability work group. And we can actually come up with very realistic user stories. So I'm happy that Tall is basically active in both. He's working with this working group. And Subhash also presented his work on his various levels of closed loop at the infrastructure level, at the network function level, at the network service level, and beyond network size level. And there was a lot of interest in how do we set policies and how would the policies interact with different layers, and how do we expose the capabilities of the policies within Nephew to the upper layers of the stack. Good discussion. Maybe some short-term user stories can come out of this effort in our next release planning. And Subhash is leading that group. If any other people are interested in volunteering in this work, feel free to add your names here. I'm personally excited for this topic, but I'm also worried about attending 8 a.m. But I'll keep in touch with Subhash and the rest of the group to see any documentation that is evolving or meeting notes. I'll keep in touch with them that way. And of course, they will bring that update to the SIG architecture as well.
Yes, Sana, Subhash here.
Hi, Subhash.
Yeah, hi. So yeah, the Nephew Day has given a lot of inputs to us, and we are started discussing on those inputs, and it has brought some nice ideas like how we could handle that assurance at different layer, and how the policy would involve in a different layer, and also the real use cases where the time sensitivity is important, and also a lot of comparison between ORAN architecture and the various loops available in the for the assurance. So those things, interesting thing actually we are discussing, and we are also discussing some of the RFPs. So people are invited to join and discuss these ideas, and we are working towards the design details now.
So do you know that this also does the cross-pollination with ORAN? You guys are considering that, right?
Not concretely. We are just discussing at very high level. I would not say we we will touch those use cases currently. But yeah, definitely. If someone opens the thought, is how we could take advantage of those architecture, definitely we will try to consider it. But yeah, we are open for the discussion. Actually,
I just put that as a placeholder, Subhash, because I think the cross-pollination with the ORAN SMO can happen. I don't know how much for basically I'm gonna write O1 here. I don't know how much for O2 as we're working with cloud. I'm sure that there is O2 involvement as well, because sometimes you're writing policies for infrastructure closed loop as well. I don't know if there is a potential possibility of O2 work with the closed loop effort. But for O1, which is heavily focused on the network functions closed loop, I think this working group has to look into that. And then when I get into the policy and closed loop, then there are more complicated things in the ORAN architecture, the near-time RIC and the non-real-time RIC. And everything about the RIC is basically the capability of closed loop. So I think has to consider what's their scope, what's this scope, and if this is basically contributing use cases for the RICs or something else, that correlation for the ORAN perspective has to happen.
Right.
So
and
that we are not duplicating the effort, right? We need to see, right?
Yeah, sure. And yeah, I just would like to mention that we are converging on impact analysis for our first user story. So that we are trying to converge on it, and possibly by next meeting or a couple of meetings, we will able to formulate some kind of architecture details there, design details there.
Excellent, excellent, Subhash. Thank you so much for taking the lead. Thank you so much for hosting the meetings there. I think that's in good hands at the moment, and we have the scheduled Thursday 8 a.m. calls. One thing I would love to see, Subhash, right now is that everything that is happening in this working group, Kaushik has created documents for each working group. I think would be a good idea to start dumping your diagrams or your meeting notes or ideas that are being discussed on a very high level on that document, which will actually create some artifacts for you to review and help you organize, and plus also share that with community so others can maybe find interesting. Oh, next work group 5 meeting looks very interesting because I have some ideas on this topic. I have done some work on that. Maybe I can go and share. That will create that traction with the community. So
Sure,
let's
sure.
organize around those documents as well. And I know that Kaushik created. Kaushik, can you throw the links for those documents to this chat? I will go ahead and link them to the working group document eventually.
I will put it in the Slack channel rather.
Okay, even better. So whoever's working on their working group meetings can actually take a look at the Kaushik's documents and start drafting what's being discussed, diagrams, high-level ideas, and like Kaushik mentioned, the takeaways from Summit. And whatever I remember, I'll also take a stab at that. Karen, you have a raised hand?
Just a logistical question around, I guess I at least have a challenge with lots of different documents floating around the place. Is there any desire to move towards putting some of this information, at least in Confluence, on the Netfield wiki, or at least link out to it from there?
Karen, we can do that. We discussed that too. We'll review to do that. In the short term, if you are struggling with finding SIG architecture documents, Kaushik has pinned them to the SIG architecture Slack channel on the top.
Okay. Is there any?
Those are the most important documents.
Is there any issues if I make a corresponding page in the wiki, just to add a list of them there?
That would be an excellent help.
So
you should.
There is already a page that I created on the wiki. You should please expand that. I'll paste that page. I think that page is also linked on the Slack channel, but I did create many of these links also on the wiki.
Okay, cool. I'll have a look.
Let me find it.
Yeah, Kaushik, I'll take a look at that too. Probably I didn't see. So agenda and notes. The SIG architecture on the top, we have all these quick links, agenda and notes, agenda tracker. We have the Zoom link. It's very handy. Working groups document I pulled out of there because it was very quick for me to get their requirements. Kaushik, I don't see the link to.
I will find it. I will add it to the Slack.
And would be very good to pin it here. And maybe the less important documents we can unpin. For example, the R2 documents, we're done with that. Maybe we can remove that for now, and we can leave the most important ones on this quick links. And Kaushik, are we using the agenda tracker anymore or no?
I do use it. Well, there are two different agenda. Well, there's an agenda tracker, as in there's a sheet, Google Sheet, and there's a document which is used to capture both the agenda and the meeting notes. I do use the latter, not the former. We are not using the sheet where we had this voting concept and people used to vote and we used to prioritize. We have never enforced that.
Should we remove it?
I suggest we remove, in the sense we should anyways have a de facto priorities based on all these dev summits and all the discussions, that we don't need necessarily a separate voting process for.
Correct. In the beginning, we had ideas for presentations coming in all different directions and different streams, and we did not have a way to structure and prioritize them. But now we have working groups, and topics related to those working groups are getting discussed in them. And the working groups updates are coming in SIG1, so we probably have a better structure. We can completely remove that agenda tracker and that idea, dismiss that. Good. Okay, we're good with this. And I already saw Kaushik sent 4 different documents for working group 1, 2, 4, and 5. We can start to use those documents, maybe dump our ideas and thoughts on what happened in the Dev Summit, our next steps, and what is happening in the working group meetings. And I will link these documents to the working groups document, where we are gathering volunteers, putting the meeting links, and setting up the high level scope for them. Anything else we should discuss in the meeting? I am done with my thoughts around working groups.
Yeah,
Any
so then
final
Sana,
Go ahead, Kaushik.
so working group, the docs exist, but then in terms of collating action items or topics for SIG1 to own from the Dev Summit, you're requesting each of the working group owners to collate those in each of those documents. Is that?
Essentially, yes. I
Okay.
will contribute, but I'm giving them the authority to list down the takeaways and the next steps and action items, and we can all discuss it here in this SIG architecture meeting next week, if possible. And whatever I know and I remember, I will make sure I go into those documents and I add to basically that list.
Yeah. Can I at least request by next week, by end of this week, that we populate the key topics, because things hopefully are fresh in people's minds from the Dev Summit, and it'll be good to document everything in terms of areas of focus for each of the working groups. So if you could do that at least by this week, that'll be fantastic.
That's an excellent idea, Kaushik. So the working group leads, this is an action item for you to basically take a look into those documents and add whatever you have in your mind fresh right now from the presentation, from the audience questions, the takeaways, next steps, since the Dev Summit and all the discussions that happened during presentations and even on the sideline are very important for us to evolve towards the next steps. Any final thoughts and comments about the Dev Summit? Kaushik, you would have seen the telco panel received a lot of good feedback over the next 2 days. Bernard, you were not there, but I think the comment that you made about the Babylon of tools was discussed over and over again and again for the next 2 days, and everybody was laughing about that. Was a very strong comment.
Very good.
Very good. And other panels were referencing back to telco panel again and again. Like someone said in the telco panel this, someone Bernard said the Babylon of tools, and those ideas I think were well structured. They created the theme for Nephew, and everybody else was actually referencing to some of those ideas, which I really enjoyed. And this was the least anticipated panel because it was all online. Kaushik, it was so funny that I was in person in the room and all the presenters were actually online. And another thing happened, Bernard, you might not have basically seen that. My expectation from that panel was that there will be 2 screens, and on one screen I'll have the question slide, basically the panel's headshots and the panel theme, and on the second screen I would have their big videos being shared, which will kind of make it more interactive. But in Summit, once we went there, we discovered that in a Google's office, the way the multimedia is set and the way the screens are set up, the Zoom is not functioning at its best. And with Zoom setup, we only have one screen, and one screen was off. And I saw that in the morning. I was very upset with Kandan, especially for this panel. But still, it went very well. Audio was very clear. And Bernard, your faces were like on that same screen. But the good thing is that when you were talking, there was a good focus on your faces as well, and good audio. So that went well.
Excellent. Thank you.
Good. We should be together, maybe face to face in one of the next meetings, if possible.
Definitely. Yes.
Yeah.
I'll try to attending next time.
Absolutely. Look forward to that. Any other thoughts, comments from the summit? Kaushik missed, so maybe things for Kaushik. And Kaushik, I also met some of our vendors on the side, and I gave everyone homework to take this as a takeaway on how do we embrace and adopt Nephew in mainstream. What is it that we can do in the short term? I think that was also a lot of fun discussions with lots of vendors who were present in that room with us.
That's nice to hear. By the way, I did sync with some of the Google folks like Tal, Stephen, John, and so forth on the sidelines last week. So I do have some of the updates, but yeah,
Good.
I'm listening into the recordings and following through on the details.
Excellent, excellent, Kaushik.
Thank you, everyone, for making it interesting, and look forward to what shapes up in the future.
Yes, lots of excitement around that. Kaushik, I'm actually good to wrap up the meeting. If you don't have any final thoughts and comments, I think we can wrap up and give everybody
Let's do
8
that.
minutes.
Cool. Thank you so much, everyone.
Awesome, thanks.
Thanks, Sana. Thanks for running the meeting. Thank you.
Yes, thank you so much.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye.